Munro Defense extends a warm welcome to our guests. We are honored today to have Michigan Congresswoman Haley Stevens, and we all know Haley because she's worked very tirelessly and dedicated her career to strengthening Michigan innovation and manufacturing. Absolutely, for sure. And so, welcome to Munro Defense.
Thank you so much.
And we also have Mr. Mike Stone, Major Mike Stone. And we all know that Mike is he's a partner at Warner Norcross Judd, which is a very prestigious law firm in Michigan. And Mike and his team, what they do is they really are trusted advisors for Michigan companies, whether that's defense and aerospace across the state of Michigan. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Today. It's an honor to have you as well. And we got Dave Foreman from VP of Munro Defense, and I'm Sue Munro, the CEO of Munro Defense. So I really appreciate all your time today. It's awesome to have you come visit Munro Defense. And I think we can honestly say that we all have a very vested interest in growing what we call a future-ready Michigan, right? It's a Michigan economy, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of an important thing. And we know that it involves several fronts. And we can talk about the critical minerals situation. We can talk about recycling infrastructure. But really, it's all about driving Michigan innovation and manufacturing. It's an important aspect to what we do every day here. So let's talk a little bit about Michigan manufacturing. And when we're talking about Michigan manufacturing and we're talking about, defense industry specifically. So we have an absolute ton of talent in Michigan. We have a lot of skills. We have a lot of capability, but we have to continue to build out that capability because we need to stay competitive. Yeah. And that's a fact, right? So I know that you have been working on a ton of projects and a ton of new policy. And so I'm kind of curious if you could help us maybe understand how you can maybe help extend some of the funding that could be available for Michigan companies for prototyping and testing and absolutely trying to scale defense technologies in Michigan.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
It's a good thing.
I love that, and we do need to see that going on, and particularly spending this time with all of you here today, just looking at the different phases of TRLs in the manufacturing engineering that you do, and being reminded, given my background actually in working in a factory of the future and doing digital manufacturing, design, and innovation, we in the federal government have got to look very explicitly at how we are co-investing and spurring the development of new technologies, in part because we're in a major competition with China and other global marketplaces. And look, it's not enough to just pat ourselves on the back. I certainly get to say oftentimes that my job is great because I get to go to the nation's capital on behalf of Michigan and brag about who we are. And we certainly have a lot of unique attributes and assets here, and our history. And Munro really symbolizes this, our history as and our current presence in automotive and certainly defense and aerospace is very unique. You can see in other states where there's certainly a manufacturing presence and a driver of the economy, but how robust it is here, and the fact that we still call ourselves an arsenal of democracy and the engineering ecosystem. I hear from manufacturers often who say, hey, we expanded here, we moved here, we located here because of the talent. But we also need to be in rigorous dialogue with our manufacturers. And this is why it is so precious to what I do to be able to spend this time here with you today. Sure, I got to geek out a bit, and thank you for letting me geek out and seeing the fruits of your labor. And this is really some of the best in business. But I do know that the policies that we're working on, in addition to defense authorizations and appropriations, which could certainly play a role in continuing that funding and that investment, but it's almost more than that. We can't be top down. We really have to be, on parallel footing. We've got to be as engaged as possible. And I see this as a part of my public service and my stewardship to the state of Michigan, but also, frankly, to our country.
Excellent, excellent. So, Mike, Warner Norcross Judd, again, premier legal firm, and you participate a great deal in the defense industry in the sense that there's manufacturers and your customers. Tell me a little bit about how you are helping your clients really bolster their presence in Michigan in terms of whether that is helping them with contracting or legal issues. Like, what are you really seeing?
Okay, so I got to talk a little bit about the firm. When I retired from the Army, went to go back to practicing law, and by the way, I was in-house attorney for 10 years in manufacturing companies in Michigan. So I think my background being part federal, part manufacturing, working in the Pentagon, working as senior leader in the Michigan National Guard, I had to explain to the firm when I joined them, and I wanted to join Warner because we have a very robust supply chain automotive working group. And I have a little bit of an automotive background from young in my legal career. And so we work at Warner in cross-functional teams, okay? Mm-hmm. And so I chair the aerospace defense team, but I have a tremendous amount of freedom that I get to do what I want to do, Congresswoman, so like you do, okay, like we talked earlier. So I love to be able to have clients like Munro Defense where I can give them, we can answer the mail and all their legal questions. But a lot of it is, like, I still have a top secret clearance. I still talk to program managers. I still go to classified briefings. Mm-hmm. I still go to D.C. every month and meet with, Michigan's delegation, HASC and SASC and Molinar and Alprop. So we're sometimes carrying the mail for Michigan companies to the member staff. We will add you to our circuit, your staff, and work with Cody.
We've had a great rapport with you. Yeah.
But I've been in the Southeast Michigan for 30 years, and the cuts that we just saw the Army make locally, they're sound and logical maybe to the Department of the Army, but there's a story to be told, and we've all got to row the boat together. As we talked about offline, automotive has its own culture, but defense is a team sport, and we all have to work together. So what we find with our clients in particular is we try to introduce them to other manufacturers locally. There's always teaming opportunities. There's always the opportunity to go together after a government contract, and we try to do as much as that as we can. We're very active, like Munro Defense is, in the community, whether it's NDIA, AUSA, Women in Defense. We build that socialization and networking into everything we do. I don't traditionally sit behind a legal desk doing legal research, writing memos, although I do legal work. This morning I got it and working with the client on getting a government contract in, at 7:30 this morning to explain to the young contracting officer who's new, what the federal acquisition regulations are so we can get this contract on award. So it's really asymmetric, but I'd say we're more than a law firm, but I'll defer to to Munro Defense to explain that. But we work very actively. As a matter of fact, you were with Congresswoman Machado. Our firm would help found Machado. Works with Bud Stevens closely. Yeah. So it's great to be on the automotive team where I give the defense insight to a large number of lawyers with automotive, and then we educate each other in these cross-functional teams. So.
Right. No, absolutely. I've said that. They're more a BD firm than a law firm. It's absolutely incredible. You see General Stone everywhere, and it's truly amazing, and we appreciate all of your support. But Mike supports a lot of the Michigan industrial base and understands the technology and where it's going. We've been a business for 35 years, but from a defense standpoint, we brought that knowledge into this particular organization about 5 years ago because of the new CMMC requirements and the cybersecurity requirements, the facility clearance, and there was a lot of work that had to go into it. We did it, and you hear a lot of fear in small businesses and even in some larger business getting into the defense business and defense industry because of the cost as well as a lot of other requirements. You learn a lot about that. But what I like about Michigan is they have a strong support community around the MEDC Oakland University.
Yeah.
As you lift, as you had mentioned earlier, and then the Lawrence Tech University on the Centropolis Accelerator.
Yes.
And one of the big key things that is happening in there, where we need to support a lot of the smaller businesses when they transition into defense, because they have a lot of the innovation, a lot of the ideas, a lot of the technology, but they're also very small sometimes at that standpoint. So being able to support them in that journey is really, really important for the state.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. And this is a quip, but when we've got so much information flooding us at any given minute, in this diligence around staying focused and centralizing our communications and really understanding, in real time, because so many of these things kind of come down in snapshots, that work is essential. And so thank you for doing it, General. I mean, it really is helpful. Because those of us who sit in my role, this, we do get pulled in a lot of different directions. I'm proud that I know my North Star and I dedicate this time in this practice, but all I get every time I sit down like this is hungry to keep working with you. And so we appreciate that. And there is a story to tell out of Michigan, and there's also more work to do as well. I mean, we really want to make sure that these assets are protected through smart growth strategies, through the effective utilization of the taxpayer dollar. We want to have private industry lead the way. This is this unique thing from the state of Michigan, and it's really quite remarkable. You think about it. No one handheld Henry Ford back in the day.
Yeah.
And the academic institutions, which, sometimes we label as like anchors, and this continued pursuit of knowledge that can also, harvest and centralize some of the equipment for, if it's that early stage testing, which some of us still know we need, early stage R&D, and the dynamism that comes along with it. And look, we've got to keep going forward. We are in a new time, and I really see, 80 years since the end of World War II, what does this mid-century mark look like for us? And we're building that every single day for Michigan and for the United States of America, setting these policies now, the decisions that we make. And, that's why it's so wonderful that you're opening your doors for us here today in this conversation. I can't tell you how much I've learned. I've left with a laundry list of things to work on.
If I may tee something up for you from my background in an aha moment that you brought up earlier today, maybe you can talk about it after I tell you this short story. At the end of 2015, I was on loan to the Pentagon to fill in for Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy. Kerry Dugan at that time, Kerry was working on loan to the Vice President at the time, and with an energy background, it's interesting, and one more other fact before I get to my point and turn it over to you, is defense in the Michigan delegation has always been bipartisan, which is great. Because back then, Fred Upton was the chair of House Energy, and so it was great. But what I learned in my Pentagon meetings early on, and I was there at the beginning of the Trump administration, was how little they understood about the upper Midwest of Michigan. How little. And earlier today, you made a comment, and when I do go to D.C. with Troy Cummings from our team, and he does a lot of our federal advocacy stuff, we struggle with some of the staffers, especially with other committees, understanding manufacturing. They're so focused on tech, East and West Coast. You brought up some statistics, Sam, and maybe you can build on that. That's part of Michigan's problem, is telling our story. So I don't know if you want to build on that.
It's interesting because there's politics at play, and that becomes all consuming. With so many people living on that World Wide Web, and we do need to carve out this time for policy making. And you hit it on the head, though. We have slowly, in some respects, gotten taken for granted, because you do see this turn of just rigorous politics. Like, I'm going to be honest, we're that state now that is kind of like Iowa, where people kind of come to, and they look at it as this political springboard. And it's like, fine, and I'm talking about the reporters who come in here and all that, but we do need to have people sitting down and understanding what exists here, these assets. There are 5 or so states left in the union whose GDP is driven from and run by manufacturing. And we have to take very seriously what occurs. I see myself as a Michigan deal maker in a good way. And by the way, you don't even need to say bipartisan when you're talking about manufacturing, innovation, tech, the confluence of our defense industry. This is the stuff that brings our country together. I mean, believe it or not, the bigger triumph is Michigan and Ohio working together. And by the way, I got some of these Ohio guys on my bills. I go, okay, well, that's a good story to tell. We've left the Big Ten for a minute, but that's a real motivation for a lot of us. And look, it's complex stuff. I mean, I have colleagues who come out and I say, you're joining me on a Manufacturing Monday visit. I want you to come and see this. And they, whatever enterprise it is, but I want them, to start to see what goes into our supply chain. Just like what I saw in some of your demonstration out there, just the peek that I've gotten into what you do for people. And I'll tell you, these are colleagues of mine, who's, oh my gosh, we can't believe this. We need to do more of this. And it's like, yeah, you do. This is capital intensive too. And that's the other thing we have to understand. Now, we don't need full subsidization, but man, oh man, we've got to figure out, when and how the government comes into play, how to break things in, the positivity that you all exude, and that's because of your accomplishments, and we really appreciate it. I don't want your jobs to be difficult, but I can tell Munro Engineering doesn't know a challenge. you just know a mission and how to get it accomplished. And I mean that seriously from what I've seen here today. But we want to continue to make this work. On the other front, on this, this is another subtle bragging point, but it's tied into our engineering ecosystem, our workforce, the universities here, which is that we've got the largest number of FIRST robotics teams of any middle school, high school system in the country. FIRST robotics didn't start here. Why is that interesting? Because FIRST robotics is tied with the manufacturers, the mentors, and the students. And that is like a direct pipeline, and what we're doing is absolutely, the inspiration, educational, but one of the lessons we've learned is it can't be one-offs. We have got to carry students through the continual, spectrum of their educational careers and get the next generation of engineers. Major, you and I could have a whole other conversation about veterans, and all that. I mean, we could really tie, and we are still working on that. We've got Senator Duckworth, who's done some great things with the skills. I've been so privileged to be at our bases overseas and see very firsthand, okay, I've done this in my time in service and I can apply this back home, but we want to continue to have the skills. And it is through, a passion and inspiration and these guiding lights and these markers of history, but the people who are also building history right before our very eyes, which is something I've actually seen here today as well. So thank you for that.
So Congresswoman, I will say this, that Michigan is recognized in DC for the upskill and retraining of veterans, especially in tech. And so we've just got to build on that. And
we have to.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
So,
and we are looking at bringing in veterans through the Skill Bridge now.
Oh, great.
It's a great opportunity for us to get a hold of some very skilled folks that understand the weapon system. They've worked with the weapon system from a more of the enlisted, but then we also have the general officers who really understand the whole systems, the policies, what they're for. So we are looking into that a lot more.
Yeah, it's almost like, we want this industrial innovation core, just like we have AmeriCorps or the Peace Corps. I mean, get your skills. No one can take them from you. And it's unbelievable how not only the dialogue, but the actual applications have changed as well. We've got a major new training center in Kalamazoo that just opened up. This is state of the art, and they're brilliant on how they're doing it. they're tying the classrooms right into it.
I love that.
And they've got the transportation. It's not a one-off. And they also have adult education as well, because sometimes we know, right after grade 12 or, even, the post-secondary educational opportunity, somebody kind of, they're in the valley, and we gotta continue to harness that and bring that in. And it's gotta be the American way. I mean, I just really feel very strongly about that. And our engineering practices are remarkable. This is saintly work in many respects as well. So,
I would agree.
I like to pay credence, to the engineers through the different associations, but the different work. We've shown a light on that, but we've also, gotten bipartisan legislation done in these practices, around STEM education. Started off with some early stage legislation. We know we got the Chips and Science Act. That was a neat opportunity. We need to be continuing to do more of that. And it's not just on the skills. Skills leads to new innovations. And the R&D tie-ins as well work very, very well on that front for us.
And I would agree with you. And I know that Michigan's very rich, and all the United States really rich in the university and engineering trades. That's all good. But I also recognize that we have this aging workforce. And what I think is happening in some regards, especially in the skilled trades area, we're starting to see a little bit of shortage in that area.
Yeah.
I know we have STEM and we have a lot of different programs there. However, like you said, there are some children, if you are not college bound, you get into that valley and you don't exactly know where to go. And I think the one thing that we all could do better on, if we want to get it to make it a Michigan rich sort of environment, the skilled trades are a good avenue for people to then be able to support the state in a very meaningful way. But I don't know if we have enough programs, whether it's tied to university or schools or industry, to help build that skilled trade capability and capacity here.
And that's where we also always need to be working alongside our industry partners and, frankly, our defense partners on the articulation of the skills. That remains so important. We want you to have a skill as a student. I want you to leave with the skill. Obviously, get your math and reading and science in. But man, oh man, leave with a skill. And we know skills also sometimes evolve. We're seeing that play out in the computer coder space. But where we're not? Engineering.
Okay.
Yeah, welding, computer numerical control machines.
Exactly.
And I'm even, slightly removed from my practitioner work on this, but, we were doing a taxonomy of jobs in the industrial Internet of Things space, really working alongside private sector partners with federal money to identify and articulate the skills that are needed. So yes, the on-the-job training can happen, the hiring can happen. There's nothing worse than the wrong fit. You go through that whole process, and then, geez Louise. But on the other side of this too, this has really got to tie in to our competitiveness agenda for our country. And what I mean by that is, we're always working on the tax code. We've got to make the tax code work for the skilled worker. We've got to make it work for the manufacturer. I understood, we had to wait a little bit on this R&D tax credit. We shouldn't have waited that long, though. We really can't be letting that lapse. We need to have a functional tax code. And frankly, and let us not forget the true small businesses that are also going to benefit from a functional tax code for the role that they play. If you're, getting that technology development at the, university level, we work on the small business innovation research grants, or just even, you're 10 years in, you're 15 years in, I want to make sure that tax code works for you in the best way possible, because the capital you are spending, and you're seeing this, with your business, the capital that gets spent on equipment alone, in addition to, the new innovations, and then the workforce training component. I mean, God bless this sector, truly. But in terms of, where I want to use my pen and my voice and my time, man, oh man, and, this is, decades of work for me, and just really seeing this come to light more and more. The tax code, the tax code, the tax code. Because as Warner Norcross knows, grants and appropriations are great. We want to have those. But man, as Ben Franklin said, there's two certain things in life, death and taxes.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure those taxes are working. And we mean it, because this really is unique enterprises. Our agricultural sector, which of course you tie into, and they love it. I'm talking to our farmers, they get it, that they're reliant on manufactured goods as well. A lot of times they're doing direct processing with the foods on site,
Nice.
but they're buying the equipment. They're dealing with the cost. So they also, in many respects, also want strong manufacturing as well. And we want the lower costs. Lower costs. And that's, it's not just saying make it in America because it feels good and it sounds good. It is a deep understanding of supply chains,
Right.
the workforce components, which are right there. It's not just, of course, we always want the jobs, but we want the lower costs, and we get that through Make in America, because you're not paying, we're going to pay on energy, but why pay double on shipment and storage and all that if we can do it here? Sorry, you're getting me on a tear.
That's
Sue.
okay. Keep going. That's all right.
They said it was gonna, we were gonna have a conversation, and I mean, and this is really, we take this stuff to the floor of the House. We carve out the time in the Congress. I'm very intentional about this, to really speak from the the well of our democracy in the Congress on these matters, because we have to remember there's still those spaces as well to move these conversations on behalf of our incredible country and the role that we all play in it.
Yeah.
So how much have we lost, and can we bring some of that back before it's too late, right? Because for a very long time we've been outsourcing manufacturing. Look at what happened to Detroit, Windsor with tool manufacturing and all of that capability and the foundation of manufacturing, right? We've lost a lot of that. So how do we bring that back to
Reskill, we have to do a lot.
to Michigan?
It's intentionality. We just have to have intentional and consistent strategies. I have found through my lived experience in my 4 terms in the Congress, a real willingness to be intentional and to come together, like you had just nicely said, Major. I mean, we haven't always had the sword out on these matters. Let the media, create the political infighting, but we can call it, the real workings of lawmaking, where and frankly policy making, where we can have an intentionality. And you're seeing now through the last 3 presidential terms, or 3 or 4, that there has been a lot more of a focus. There wasn't. We lost it for, when you talk about how are we going to bring it back? Well, we did lose some of it. And, at the turn of the century, it was going to all be services and tech and ones and zeros. And now you see the tech industry, it's like, oh, they want in the capital intensive space. They want in the manufacturing space. And, you've had some successes working with some of those folks as well. And I give you a lot of credit for that. I'm sure there's a lot of stories there, but and that's deeply important. But we've got to set our goals, and we've got to meet them, and we got to not switch them just because elections happen either.
Yeah.
And that was actually a point that I was going to kind of bring up, is that when we are competing against an adversary that doesn't have a timeline,
right,
they are looking at the long game, and we tend to look at the short game. How do we compete against that?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, the Senate has the Senate parliamentarian, and it's sort of this nonpartisan role, and they kind of get to determine what goes into spending bills or, reconciliation packages. And I think we need a general for manufacturing. And this is something Senator Peters has worked on,
Okay.
A real directive, and not something that's buried. I mean, when we start to really look at how our federal government operates and how the goals get set, and I've asked this in committee hearings, and we're not doing that is one area of concern of mine, is that we're not doing enough measurement in terms of the progress and where we're leading. Like the Australians are measuring it globally, but like we should be measuring it and seeing where we are and not taking it for granted. And so, I've been pushing on a multitude of presidential administrations, to really think about this type of role and this type of position. And, we can't be a country of absolute power just based on elections. We do have to have, and you see this manifest with the DOD, and goodness gracious, we love them for it. It's like the safety and security of this country that doesn't know, certain, bounds of the, the politics, which is important. And everything has to have its own role. These are all pegs on the board, but I think an intentionality around manufacturing that isn't buried, that is kind of front and center, and not top down either. You don't need more bureaucracy. I mean, I know the folks you work with say this, they don't need more of that. But we do have to set our goals and then rally around it. It's like an Uncle Sam moment. Yeah. We need to say that for the workforce. Yeah. Hey, we want you. We want your skills. Yeah. We want you trained. We want, this is something that will never lead you. Serve this nation. You're a veteran. Yeah. But the priorities, and it's very interesting because, what I've seen, let's say in two spaces, chips and in minerals, this has transcended a multitude of administrations. Right. Yeah. And it's going to continue to go. It's going to continue to go. We can't just be motivated to act because of a crisis, though. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. That's that goal setting. And change is hard. Renovating is hard. Yeah. That's the phase we're in right now as a nation. We're talking to the folks in downtown Detroit, and so much amazing development and work that's happened. It's a modern success story. Yet again, Michigan besting expectations, on urban renewal and all that. And then I'm told, because they know I'm a manufacturing geek, we don't have enough electricity capacity still in the city for new manufacturing to come in. And they've got that whole new lab in the Grand Central Station. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and it's that is an alarm bell. And that is unacceptable. And so we've got to continue to build on the courage to lead. We need more leadership, and if you don't mind me saying it, and less politics. I mean, truly. I mean, this is just leadership, and it's not to be sharp-elbowed at anyone. I see these leaders every day, and particularly in this Midwestern corridor. We have real respect for one another. Doesn't matter, who you're caucusing with or what colors by your name. I mean, we know we've got to do this. We have learned some lessons, and we should feel inspired, but we've got to be focused, and you all help with that. I mean, you see this with who, you're working with, and the guys and gals who do it right are the ones who lean in, and I want to be your partner on that front. I mean, this is what motivates my work. As I'm a true public servant. As long as I'm in elected role, it's the heart of public service. And that is the straight motivation here. And I get to brag about Michigan manufacturing, but we got to do the work. We got to set the goals. We got to see leadership.
But if I can build for a second on defense, there are more tools, and thank you for supporting these tools in the Pentagon, and it has been over multiple administrations for businesses, whether it's Title III Defense Production Act, whether it's the loan programs, or whether it's now there's a program for private equity. Michigan Capital Network has a fund backed by the Department of Defense for advanced technologies and investments. I think in Southeast Michigan, we see a lot of corporate knowledge about those programs. Working with the Michigan Manufacturers Association recently, we've had some roundtables. I don't think outlying Michigan. So, I mean, there's a concerted effort to educate Michigan manufacturing businesses. These tools exist.
Yeah.
And so
I was hoping
I want to use this forum to make sure that that's out there, and maybe you could comment on that. So.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time communicating, and certainly everyone's welcome to go to stevens.house.gov and sign up for our federal newsletter, in part because we feel that too, that we want folks gaining access to this information, the implementation of legislation, the programs that get existed, those can't exist in a vacuum. And look, you don't want to overly complicate our tax code because it's already so dizzying for people, but these are the ways in which, we're interacting with our federal government, and defense is the main charge of it, and that is going to drive. We want to also do due and reviews with Defense Production Act, and certainly know that, because the global pandemic period, kind of brought a lot of attention to the Defense Production Act, and there's still a conversation around modernizing and working on it. And sometimes too, friends, this is about forcing the conversation. It's about table setting. Who's not sitting here that should be, so we're not passing the football around, and so that we're not just having a bunch of side conversations, which is why what Major does is so important, because I'll say, okay, he's got his role in this, but do we need, you're here in Auburn Hills. We know Auburn Hills is one of the, you mentioned Underwriters Laboratory, one of your guys on the demonstration mentioned Underwriter Laboratory. And we watched them open up, and we're thrilled they're here. Why and how have they been able to do it? You mentioned MEDC, great partnerships, state, local, federal, and some of that, forget personalities. You're always going to have personalities. You deal with personalities. You could have novels on that in terms of your enterprise and what you've all worked on. But it's forcing the conversation, and that's part of the table setting. And you better believe when left hand starts talking to right hand, that's another way to yield some really big results. I've seen this happen in manufacturing. I've seen some incredible public-private partnerships form out of that. I learned this lesson from one of my first bosses in the Obama administration, who was the president's senior counselor for manufacturing policy. And that was like that manufacturing general. But the thing is what we need with the general is, let's just kind of set some, we did the Advanced Manufacturing Partnership, and we wrote this articulation out. But let's set these goals, let's get them inputted in, and it's almost like a national charge in some respects. You talk about the presidential fitness test. Well, that's a nice thing to do, but, and again, do you set these goals, and do you maybe, just tweak the tax code to match that, so we're getting this? Because we don't want to see investment and then not have industry be ready, right, and then have it go to China. Yeah. These are some of the lessons that we have learned from the first 25 years of this new century. Just straight up, point blank. And we don't need to be foolish with the taxpayer dollar. I'm not saying that, but this is where, these basic understandings of, basic research really come into play. I saw who you've worked with, and, there's some stories there on that front. A123 is an example of that. And hey, the capital markets work, but who bought it? China. So now we're getting dinged because we're trying to bring that technology back, and they're saying, well, you're buying from China. I said, hey, you checked your clothes label yet? Yeah. And so we can't be writing these things off, but you hit the nail on the head. It's a 20-year strategy, and help us articulate that. Your expertise is leadership for us. It is leadership. I mean, I'm doing a lot of talking here, but I feel very intense about this because it's so needed. You're living it. You really are. Right. Put the time capsule for me, okay? Just do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you put in the time capsule,
Sometimes we're really risk adverse. Mm-hmm. We're more comfortable doing what we've always done.
Yeah.
And we have brilliant minds, great technology, and sometimes, whether it's Japan, China, or somebody else, will adopt those technologies because they see the value and they will bring them to their country. Deming is a great example of that. And then we start to see what's happening, and now we are trying to do that catch up. Oh, we've got to bring them over here. Now we need to catch up. Now we need to catch up. Now we need to catch up. And we have to change that type of thinking.
Yeah. And you're right. I think it's going to come about through some radical new thinking, because we have to be able to have those technologies, to your point, to be sustainable. They can't be just a flash in the pan, like it's good for this year. It has to be long and enduring, so we can.
It's like safe storage. It's safe, so it's because I just think about even the last 15 years, and what would that have looked like? And obviously, that's also a question for how our free market works, and we're learning some of these lessons. Listening to some of our automotive executives in particular around some of these industrial policy efforts, those are some good cues to take. And I think in some respects we're getting it right, and we don't need to be down on ourselves. It's just like, oh, wait a minute, this is a different set of competition, which is why we started the committee. And we're thrilled to have John Molinar from Michigan leading it. We've got this bipartisan tango going on, and that's good. That's a real movement for us here in Michigan, and that's part of that bright light that you were talking about from some of those visits. But and this is not me putting it all on you, by the way. I'm just saying your expertise is wildly valuable, and we've got these wonderful partners again at Defense. The MOUs that have gotten signed with NIST over the years, the DHS guys, when we start looking at cyber, who were really some of the first in this country, decades ago to start those conversations. We want to continue to unlock the expertise and have that continue to come together. So. Can we geek out like this once a week? This is, sorry for my sermons.
No, you're okay.
Monroe's the place to do it.
My dad always says to me, don't apologize for your passion.
No, never.
There needs to be we need a lot more education where not such a small group understands, but there's a huge population in this country, and I don't think that they all truly understand the competitive environment we're in.
Yeah.
I don't think that all the leadership understands the problems that exist, and I just feel that a lot of the problems we face as a nation can be help bring us all together by more education. We talk about nuclear energy and how much we need that, but there's a huge fear.
Yeah.
But that fear is founded on old rules, old technologies.
Yes. The narrative. We have to change the narrative.
Renovating systems and thinking, and listen, you don't have to convince me on that front. And honestly, that could be a real cost saver for us too. It could be healthy and it could be a cost saver. And it's so easy. We don't need to beat ourselves up. We stand on the shoulders of giants. You don't need to be superhuman. We're just all human. But man, look what we've built. Look at what we're continuing to build. And so, I'm working on the Detroit energy projects and things like that as well. I learn and I work. That's the job, right? And it's a privilege to be able to cut out and learn alongside all of you.
And so with that in your Unearth, the America Futures Act, we talk about rare earth elements. We've spoke earlier about, rather than focusing on the one-on-one, where can we use technology or R&D to have replacements, but from a processing standpoint, I think that's equally as important, which is modernizing the way that we actually manufacture, because we can control that environment, how we process to make it safe, make it clean, et cetera, rather than just handing that problem to somebody else, burying our head and thinking that everything is okay.
Well, without even knowing that legislation came from you, right? It was what we have been seeing and identifying from industry, the conversations that started on China Competition Committee, hearing from industry partners who were saying, hey, we can do synthetic, we can do cleaner. It was interesting when someone said, well, are you doing a mining bill? I said, no, this is processing and refining. Of course, there's always going to be, just like with, some of our other energy segments, some sort of original sourcing, But no, this is about taking back a segment of our supply chain. And that is what motivated me to write a 100-page bill, real legislation. It's like this major, they say, or is it messaging? No, this is not messaging. This is real policy for this country. I want to get other people involved in it. Where I get to go out there with every state in the union represented, and have that conversation. And you all are living proof of it. So, we've introduced a bill. We've introduced it to get people working on it and talking about it, and we want to continue to do that. The bill is loan guarantees, tax credits, of course, the tax code, and R&D Center of Excellence, encouragement of working with our true allies and trade partners who follow the rules-based order here. And look, I'm not someone who's advocating for decoupling. I just want American strength, and I want our country to continue to lead the free world by the rules that we set. And that's why, across a multitude of industries that you all touch, in automotive, in defense, and aero in particular, we've got, it's aggressive right now, and it's exciting. It's aggressive. It's aggressive. It's exciting. And that's the story that needs to be told. And look, we're weighing in on some of these other things coming out of the administration, on cost and on trade deals. But I've got a North Star. I've got a North Star in terms of, where I'm going to be casting my vote, and the bills I want to be writing, and the story I want to be telling.
That's awesome. So we cannot leave this conversation without talking about the fact that you tossed your hat in for the Senate.
Oh.
Senate, we have to do that. And I'm just curious, what made you decide to pursue the Senate seat, and how are you going to advocate for Michigan as you go forward?
I'll tell you, it's an incredible honor to be able to look at this entire state and say, I want to be one of your chief lawmakers. And I really feel this Michigan moment in my bones. I love what I do. I mean, I really do. And I just am so passionate about all of this. And I couldn't believe that, we're already going for another election in some respects.
I know, it's coming fast.
It's like, I'm thinking about running that political ad for everyone in Michigan, like, okay, it's election season again. I know you're already tired of these messages, but I am just a public servant who wants to serve our state. But it is, for me, about, what led me to put up my hand to run for Congress, which was, the manufacturing economy. It was I was working in a manufacturing R&D lab, and I saw something missing in the conversation. I thought I could bring this. It's about putting together unique coalitions. I think this next generation really deserves to see that, the next generation of public servants. And, my motivations are very clear, stand up for, the workforce and our economy, tell our story. And as a senator, and because I kept thinking, oh my gosh, in the House, I get a lot done. I mean, okay, what do you get if you're in the Senate? As a House member, we always say the Senate drives us crazy. Well, you actually get to hold a bigger card, and what I mean by that is, there is more I can get done for Michigan. Good. There is more I can get done. Our district is a bragging point. You're a part of it right now in Michigan 11. But, that's what I intend to do. So I said, okay, I've written these bills. We'll see, 2-year cycles, with the terms I have right now. We'll see what I can get done. I was named the most effective lawmaker because I was getting so many of my bills done. And a couple of them, the Senate didn't get to them when at the end of the last term. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to try again this term. Get to the Senate. I'll keep working on this stuff. But I want to be a part of this national dialogue. And I'm very proud to have bills signed by, both presidents in the terms that I've served in. And, that's what I intend to do, is continue to, pass laws for this country that enable Michigan to thrive.
Well, I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
We look forward to working with both of you in the future. There's a very strong team here, and we're proud to be part of the Michigan Strong Coalition, so to speak. So, again, thank you for your time and your support.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, we should do it again. We could do this a year from now. It'd be a delight.
We would love that. We would love that.
No, I do these
We'll bring you back when
manufacturing-
you're a senator.
Yeah, that would be good too.
We knew you
That
would.
Yeah, no, you can bring me back when we do that. I know.
That's
No,
hilarious.
it's a neat and humbling thing. It's an amazing opportunity though to continue to do the most good. You know, and that's really where I've seen it. So you guys are just fantastic. That's everything. I come by now. You're giving me hours. You're never going to get rid of me. I'll keep coming by. You know,
I like it.
So count on that when I'm in the Senate. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.